topic of you, Brice, I actually had a question for you.
Yeah.
Just because I saw that you kind of grew up in a kind of conservative background, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do too. Like, I definitely came from a very conservative background with my family, and the town that I grew up in, it was pretty small, pretty religious as well. So I just kind of wanted to ask you a little about that, and like, kind of like, did you break away from that at all in finding the paranormal? What kind of made you feel like an acceptance for it, I suppose?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny, growing up, it's a very black and white kind of structure. I grew up in a very rural part of Ohio, just north of Columbus. My dad used to be a minister. So a lot of things, I should say, were labeled as like spiritual warfare or like spiritual.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't have necessarily quantified them as like ghosts or apparitions, like all of the things that we sort of like talk about now on our podcast. We would either, sort of categorize them as like completely dismissible, like that didn't happen, or an angel or a demon.
Yeah,
there
like it was
no
evil. It was a
area.
force of good or evil, something that was like externally trying
and
to like
it did.
out for
That's such
you.
a good point. Is that it had the undertone of like that is evil versus good. There's really there was not a lot of wiggle room for gray area or moral ambiguity, or like, many times spirits are just manifestations of energy, I think.
Yes.
And they're not the signy.
Sorry.
Right. And there's no morality attached to that. It's just like, oh, this is something, of course, sometimes there's something more malicious or whatever, but most of the time they're just trying to communicate, or it's energy that's been brought in, or who knows what. That was not part of my world growing up. Everything was very much assigned a morality. Most of it was evil. Yeah. So as I grew up, so I actually went to Christian university as well. So that sort of spiritual warfare mindset really continued quite far into like my 20s. And then as I like came out myself, came to LA, started unlearning some of those like ingrained behaviors and self-loathing and things like that. So we're getting very deep. Yeah. Your mind begins to open up. And so it's like, well, if these things that I've always believed really don't apply to my life anymore, aren't really that true anymore, aren't provable anymore, what other things does that open you up to? And when you're unable to explain things in a black and white system, a binary system, if you will, if they don't fit in neatly, where does that leave you? And for me, it's left me with just an openness of, I don't know. A lot of times, like what Tammy and I have experienced, things that are supernatural, paranormal, all of those things. I'm like, I don't know what that was, but I definitely can't explain it. So probably the world and life and death and all of those things are bigger than what I was taught to believe they were.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. Coming from, I'm not going to say I came from the most spiritual background or, the most Christian background, but it was kind of the same in my household too, like, oh, there's good and evil. Oh, that's bad. That's the devil. You know what I'm saying? There was never really no understanding really.
No openness to it. It was just a fear.
It's like, don't put your hand in the socket, get the socket, but you don't know why, you know what I mean? You're just curious by it, you know what I mean? But
yes.
I don't know. That was probably a bad example, because you know why not to put your hand in the socket. I don't know. So
that mindset is very true. Just like if you dabble, it's so funny. I was talking to a friend of mine. I've known her essentially my whole life. We both went to the same university and grew up in church together. And we were just talking and laughing. And there's this, just some TikTok video about like Christian moms during Halloween, and one of the bits, not to explain the TikTok video, I hate when people do this, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
Do it.
They're driving by, and they drive by sort of just like kitschy traditional Halloween decorations, like a ghost and a little green witch, and she's like, "Kids, don't look, it's dark-sided."
That's my mom.
That's so true.
That's my
mom.
mom.
They were all like, "Don't even look at it. If you dabble in it," like to your example of the light socket, like don't touch it, or you'll go straight to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a 99-cent store Halloween decoration.
Yeah.
That's my mother. That ain't nothing but the devil. Jesus, Lord. I be like,
Yep. Yeah.
I be like, if you don't calm
Yeah, my
down,
husband's
woman.
family is like that too. They, when I got married to my husband, I brought out the box of Halloween decorations. He's like, "What is this?" I'm like, "It's Halloween," you know. Because we never did anything like this, and I'm like, "Why?" They believe it's the day of the devil, and it's for worshiping and for sacrificing. And
Yeah.
I was like, no. Actually, it dates way back to the Druids. It dates way back actually to a point where it was like part of the tradition of candy companies as well.
Yeah.
So you know, there's so many explanations for it, but a day of evil is not one of them.